hard men who have tossed away a piece of themselves, a piece of their souls, their futures, in some cases, their grounding, to do violence on your behalf. I say that because I've been surrounded by these hard men my whole life. The story I was telling on the show yesterday, and I encourage you to listen to the segment, we got a lot of feedback on it, was of a Delta Force operator I ran into in Bagram Air Base doing a mission with the Secret Service over there. He was about to get pinned with a medal by Barack Obama. I told the story yesterday. We don't need to repeat it. But one of the things I highlighted in the story was how this Delta Force operator had a stare in his eyes I'll never forget. I can't describe what it was. I can't. But the stare was frightening. I don't mean he scared me. It was frightening in that it was clear this man had seen so much and a piece of him was lost. The things he had to do to keep us and our men secure. Whether you agree with these missions overseas or not, don't dare question these men's bravery. That look, I've seen it a lot. I don't know how to describe it, but if you've been, you know what I'm talking about. And one of those men who kind of had that look when I first met him emailed me yesterday. I can't give too many details about him because I don't want to do that. I don't want to put him in a bad spot. But he listened to yesterday's show. He's one of the hardest men I've ever met. Infantry officer, federal agent, a genuinely hard man. And at times a hard guy to talk to. I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean it's clear he's seen a lot. He sent me an email after yesterday's show. And if it's okay, I'm only going to read to you some portions of it because the rest of it is so difficult to read that I'm afraid if I put it on the air, some of you would get sick because it's that hard to listen to. Here's what he sent me about the need for hard men like him who have to forfeit away a piece of themselves to learn how to do violence for us. Men Geraldo will never understand, although he claims to. He said, Dan, great podcast today. I really felt that. A lot of people don't understand what it's like coming home from combat after doing things for your country. We have to live with what we've done. I feel I forfeited any chance to see my daughters in the afterlife. When your ROEs were forced to smoke check anyone with a shovel and an orange bucket, including kids, it was like the Wild West. And your enemy changes you. You grow a hate inside that you can't come to terms with. You watch your Marines die. You watch them get maimed, losing legs, arms, private parts, all the while knowing that the locals knew where the IEDs and the ambushes were coming from, but didn't tell you during one of the many shuras you sat in. He says usually these bombs were 15, 20 pounders, which would take out a leg or both, sometimes a hand and a part of an arm if you were carrying your weapon at a low ready. He said, but the worst was a 50 to 75 pounder that turned you into what we called pink mist. We backed the truck up and put the pieces in the back using a poncho and the kid next to him who was in shock while dropping every ordnance we had from fixed rotary wing, artillery, and mortars. That's hard to read. I've read it now 5 times, and it gets harder each time. I'm going to read to you a little bit more of this. It's not much about a half a paragraph, half as long as what I just read. I had to leave out some other parts, folks. The reason I'm reading this, again, is because to the supporters of Hamas and terrorists and socialists and fascists and genuinely evil people who have a really hard time classifying who the good and the bad guys are because you listen to morons in our society who insist that people are perfectible and it's just the white male patriarchy and the successful meritocratic societies like Israel that are the problem. You are empowering the people that are turning our soldiers into pink mist. What do you think he's talking about with pink mist? Good guys spraying confetti around? He's talking about savages, Hamas, jihadists, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, terrorists who would kill you in a minute. There is no utopia. This is the real world that hard men live in every single day. Here's another part of the email. Again, I had to leave out. You might leave out. Yes, what I left out is even worse. My friend, he says, you carry that hate with you for the rest of your life. It doesn't go away. It's actually gotten worse. He says, I'm that savage you talked about that didn't care that Palestinian kids died because you can understand how the Israelis can hate them for what they do and represent. You have nightmares almost every night and you hardly sleep. Oh, gosh, this is hard to read. Holy Moses, this is bad. He says, your daughters die in bad ways in your dreams and you fear it's the punishment coming for you and what you did and that it might all come true. Can you imagine living a life like this? These are the hard men. I know this person. This isn't some random guy who emailed me. It's a person I know very well. A hard, hard man who had that look all day, all the time. Rarely a smile. Do anything for you. A truly decent human being. But a man who had forfeited away a significant chunk of his soul, ready to do violence on your behalf to keep the evildoers away from you. That's the real world. I mentioned a book yesterday during that segment, a book by, I think he's a lieutenant colonel. His name is Dave Grossman. The book is called On Killing. The book should be mandatory reading for anyone in law enforcement, the military, federal law enforcement. The book describes the horrors of what it's like having to train people to kill on your behalf. Hard men to become that border between you and the evildoers. It talks about the real horror of trying to train people to kill. Something we're not born instinctively to do. Well, here's the author of that book. I found this clip out there. The book by, again, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, talking about the need for all of us to become a little harder in our lives, for all of us to become sheepdogs, because the evildoers out there exist. There are wolves everywhere. And unfortunately, there are sheep everywhere. That's his snowflake class that wants to say, oh, Hamas isn't too bad. We can talk them into it. Don't worry about it. What about the kids? Because they live in a fake utopia that doesn't exist. And Lieutenant Colonel Grossman talks about the need for sheepdogs, people like you, willing to take the burden of protection on your back. Check this out.
In America, I would submit to you, there's a higher ratio of sheepdogs than most other nations around the planet. People who have chosen to train themselves, to arm themselves, to prepare themselves. And so there are sheep. The vast majority truly are just gentle creatures and only hurt by action, extreme provocation. And then there are wolves. The wolves will feed the sheep without mercy. And then there are sheepdogs. The sheepdogs are those who are dedicated to protecting the flock. And that's what we're talking about is America, more than anybody else on the planet today, is a nation of sheepdogs. You know, maybe Israel, maybe Switzerland, just few of the nations that really nurture that sheepdog spirit, that empower their citizens, that give them the resources. And, you know, have you wondered what it was like to be, what would it have been like to be one of the samurai, you know, Book of Five Rings, you know, in that era, what would it have been like to be one of the knights of old? This is what it's like. We've got state-of-the-art tools. We've got state-of-the-art training. We're given the authority to administer life and death. That sheep mindset is really pretty pathetic.
Yeah, it is. The sheep are the snowflake class out there that want to believe real evil doesn't exist. And if those awful Israelis would just stop with their oppression or whatever buzzword they use for the day, the wonderful Hamas terrorists would just lay down their arms and grab a Snuggie and go over and roast marshmallows with them. Sheep. They're sheep. They will be preyed on, as Lieutenant Colonel Grossman said, mercilessly by the wolves when their uselessness and their utility is finished. It's your job to be a sheepdog. If you read the book, folks, I can't, listen, I didn't publish the book. I get no royalties from this book. I'm telling you to read this book. It'll change your life. Talking about the need to be a sheepdog yourself. The need to train in the red zone. The red zone, to keep your body fit. Don't ever be a sheep. Learn how to defend yourself. Don't rely on the government. That's your job. That's your job. It's your job to understand the dangers and the hazards of violence from real people and evil people in the real world in real time, and to learn how to prevent that from happening to you. That's your job. No one else's. That's why at 46, with cancer having just ravaged my body, I never skipped one day of training, even in the chemo. Not one. No one cares that you're going through chemo. Evil people don't give a damn. They'll kill you, and they'll love it. It's your job to not let that happen. Don't be a sheep. Be a sheepdog.